that gave a small group of people, there's 12 families that own and control all of the shares in the Federal Reserve System, and nobody else can buy into it. You want a piece of that action? Forget it. And the way that they kind of worked around that a little bit is there were a lot of other influential and powerful people involved that weren't shareholders in the Federal Reserve. So how were they going to be appeased? Well, they were going to be appeased by setting up special trusts. That those people would be able to set up these trusts. Of course, the trusts had a deadline. There was a deadline for establishing these types of trusts where their earnings and their capital accumulations would be protected. So if you weren't in on the ground floor of this, see, because the goal, one of the main goals of this whole thing was to prevent the emergence of new capital accumulations, to keep competition, right? People that would compete, that would rise to a point where they could actually compete with these people. John D. Rockefeller said it best, right? He says competition is a sin. Right? Competition is something not to be tolerated. Right? It's a sin. So they set this thing up to prevent the emergence of any power. See, like if it was, and I believe that it is and was and always will be, under the control of the same group, the international bankers and their agents, because, I mean, J.P. Morgan was a good example. When he died, they thought, oh, he's the richest man in America, he owns so many things. When he died, they found out that he only owned about 15% of the things that that was widely held, that he was thought to have owned. He only owned about 15% of it.
And so who owned the rest?
The Rothschilds, right? So he was just the Rothschilds man in the United States. Like Rockefeller. All of these people were propped up. They were put into those positions. So a small group of people, it's like that scene from The Godfather Part 3, where he's researching, he's trying to figure out who staged some assassination, and he comes back to the end of the film, he says, it's just a few families, he says, they own and control everything.
That's right.
Right? And we talked about on the show a couple of times the 4 pillars of power. You got ecclesiastical power, military power, political power, and economic power. The 4 pillars of power. And these same instrumentalities that we're talking about, people that own and control the shares in the Federal Reserve, the royal families of Europe, people that have held positions of power and control for centuries, for thousands of years, for millennia. They're still in positions of power and control today.
And same families. That's right.
Now, the rest of the world is pretty much enslaved. They're enslaved to the dictatorship of this wealthiest few. And now it's reached a point where,
and we support them, because that's what our taxes are doing. We're supporting them.
Well, yeah. Everything that you do.
Salaries,
well, they make sure they have ownership and control of just about everything. Everything we see and hear and read, all of the major industrial corporations, the print media, the electronic media, everything. They own and control everything. So of course, everything is done in their interest. And they own the government itself. They own anyone of any significance in the government is owned and controlled by them. And the legislators, parliament, the clergy, the Congress, the Senate.
They even own public access,
courts,
because they
the
will not
judges.
give me a good time slot where my show could be viewed. I mean, thank God for YouTube and MySpace, but they give me Friday at 5:30. Nobody's home on Friday at 5:30.
Right. So what's the function of the government and to include the courts? Well, their main function is to control, absolute control over society, control just about every aspect of our lives, control over our person and our property, and to punish their enemies, people they perceive as their political or ideological enemies, to put them in jail, and to strip them of their property. That's what the courts does. That's what the so-called law enforcement agencies do. And what they've done now is at one time in the country there was the appearance of rule under the constitutional liberty, right? There was at least the illusion of that. And now that's been done away with. And now we're basically, we're not, it's not even the illusion that we're citizens in a constitutional republic. Now we're definitely just subjects in, I don't know what you'd call it. It's almost like a form of feudalism.
All right, that's true, but however, Middle America doesn't know that, and even people from New York don't know that if they've never been through the court system. They still believe there's constitutional law that is being upheld in the courts. It's only those people who have been through the system that find this out, whether it's a divorce, as simple as a divorce hearing, or a freedom of civil rights issue. But the average person doesn't know, because when I tell like a Joe Schmo who's never dealt with the system, they go, you mean they don't listen to the Constitution? They're like, they basically think I'm, you know, making this up. So the only people who really know are the people who
They don't want you to know. They don't want you to know.
No, they're like ostriches. They bury their head in the sand. They want to believe it.
Also, the government doesn't want you to know certain things.
No.
As a matter of fact, they don't even want lawyers to know certain things. Lawyers are taught what they're taught to believe in law books. Certified public accountants are no different. They all get their schooling from the same books. There's things about it that they don't know about. Somebody else has to bring it to their attention, and they don't even believe them when they tell them.
Give us an example.
Well,
What?
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, when you were talking to Carmine, who was a very prominent certified public accountant, he headed the accounting firm that handled the law firm of Nixon and Mitchell.
oh yeah.
Yeah, so he had I know a couple of times I had to see him, and I went to his office, which was down on Pearl Street, I think, and there were 50 or 60 desks there, a girl sitting at every desk. You know, it was a big department, a big bookkeeping department for that firm. And I don't know, I got into a conversation with him, and I said, well, maybe you should talk to Joe. Well, Joe spoke to him, and he told him things, as an accountant, things he should have known, he didn't know. They weren't taught to know certain things. It's not beneficial for the governing body for lawyers to know certain things, and for certified public accountants or accountants to know certain things. They want them to work for the system.
Lawyers do kind of learn as soon as they get out of law school that what they learned in school is not what goes on in the real world. They do learn that on their own, because they're going through these trials and they're finding, that's horrible.
I don't think anything is all good or all bad. I mean,
it's on a scale, it's way more bad in this country than ever.
Maybe, but I'm just saying, you know, I think of unions in this country, and I think of the fact that before the unions, people were working 14, 16 hours a day. Children were working, 10-year-olds were working. The workplace was unsanitary, unsafe, meager working conditions. Everything. Unions were necessary at one time, is what I'm saying.
Right.
It was very important to have unions. So now they have unions, and I'm pro-union. I've always been. All my life I've been pro-union, but I